Dave Zimmerman here, chop wood, carry water. And I wanted to show you today a few things on the foam roller. And you can feel free to cherry pick any of this stuff. There's a lot of great chest opener, shoulder blade position stuff here, but I also wanted to throw in a little bit of workout stuff for you as well. But I wanted to talk a little bit about shoulders. And so one great thing I love about the roller is that even just getting on it and lying down on that roller for a period of time is just a great way to kind of have gravity open up your chest. Most of us tend to do a lot of activities during our day where we're kind of hunched forward. Anytime you're sitting, anytime you're working at the computer, anytime we're at a counter working on things, these are even gardening, that kind of thing, are often tasks where we really end up closing the chest. And this really is a nice opportunity to kind of counteract all of those movements and any tightness we might have in the chest. Keep in mind, just talking about shoulders, I like to point out when talking about shoulders to people that your muscular stability in those shoulder blades is really where you get the lion's share of your stability in the shoulders. When you think about your skeletal connection, really think about this whole upper limb, and the only bony connection really to your spine and your central skeleton comes through your collarbone, right? That's why that collarbone tends to be the part that kind of gives when we have incidents where you fall on that arm, because there's no bony connection in the back. That shoulder blade floats on your back, and so it's really up to you to get those shoulder blades into the right place. And so again, something like the foam roller here really gives you a nice gravitational assistance to get those blades into a nice stable position, nice open chest, shoulder blades down. And in doing that, puts that shoulder joint in a much safer position as well. Oftentimes, people have problems with various impingements in that shoulder, and oftentimes that really comes on because we've got tight chest muscles or tight upper traps or both, where we're actually moving that shoulder into a position that kind of closes that joint space. And so that acromion process off of the shoulder blade comes through here, and that clavicle comes to there as well. And then we've got your humerus, that arm bone comes up into that socket as well, and we can kind of get this perfect storm when the chest gets tight and when the upper traps get tight, where that's all being sort of crunched together, so that anytime we go to move that arm, there are some bony landmarks on that arm where, especially depending on the alignment of that arm, those bony landmarks kind of start smacking into things when we start moving that arm around. And so the more we can get open, get those blades down, create a little bit of space in that front of that shoulder joint, and it just allows us a much more free range to move through our natural range of motion with that arm. So with that, let's get started. So I have my partner Chi here along to help today. And what I'm going to start with here, notice I'm aligned my spine along the roller, and I'm just going to take a few moments here to just let gravity draw downward on my body, and let that open my chest up, let my hips settle into that roller, let my feet settle into the floor. You can do this with your arms at your sides, or your hands on your hips, or your belly. But I'm just going to take a few breaths here with a nice full inhale. Very helpful to think about that Pilates style breathing here, breathing into the sides and backs of the ribs, As I exhale, I'm just letting my belly button sink into my spine here. Letting the back of my head melt into that roller. Notice I've got just a slight tuck to my chin here as well, so I've got this nice long feeling in the back of the neck. And I'm going to start actually with a gentle hip opener that I really like for those of you with any spine, hip stability issues or scoliosis. Sometimes we want to be real careful about getting you in real asymmetrical positions with your legs, which kind of rules out a lot of the things we would use as a hip flexor stretch. And so on the roller here, I'm going to bring my hands down to the floor just to give myself a little extra stability, but I'm going to do just a nice heel slide here. And when we do this on the roller, especially, this makes a nice hip opener because my hips are up above the floor, and with my foot at the floor, it puts me in just enough extension in that hip that I can, when I really get those abs in, I can really start to feel a sense of length in the front of the hip. Don't go for the big stretch here, but just go for that sense of length. And great opportunity to work on some light stability work here as well. I'm using those hip stabilizers. I'm using those deep abdominals to help keep my pelvis nice and quiet as I move alternately my legs. I'm going to do one more of these on each side. Feel free to pause the video at any point and do extra of any of these that are feeling real helpful for you. And floating those arms up toward the ceiling. So we want to start to think a little bit about shoulder blades. First, I'm keeping those shoulders away from the ears. I'm going to reach toward the ceiling. That's what we call a protraction of the shoulder blades. Notice my spine is going to stay nice and quiet here. So as I exhale, I'm going to let those shoulder blades move into a much flatter plane here. And again, keeping those blades away from ears. Notice I'm not arching my back up here or letting that base of the breastbone pop up toward the ceiling. Inhaling to protract, exhaling, and really let gravity do the work when you retract those shoulder blades. Inhaling to reach up, exhale to flatten out. 2 more times. Then those arms come down to the sides. I'm going to keep them right alongside my torso here as I go into my elevation. This is not normally a movement that we ask you to actually kind of avoid and counteract, but just a light elevation here to feel the contrast. And exhale, sliding those blades away from the ears and retracting those shoulder blades. Sorry, that's a depression of those shoulder blades. Depressing those shoulder blades, elevating those shoulder blades. 2 more times. And when I do this, I get tight enough in my neck here. I actually feel a bit of a stretch in my upper traps here when I keep that chin tucked and really reach those arms. Now, moving into our chest opener here. This one, I'm going to walk my fingertips toward my spine. Again, I'm working to keep those shoulder blades away from the ears, but I am protracting those shoulder blades. They're not in that flat plane anymore. When I open up, I'm going to bring them back to that flat plane, and I'm going to broaden out through my chest toward the outside walls here. Taking a nice full inhale there. When I exhale, I'm going to change the arm that was on top. Inhale, walk those fingertips toward the spine. Exhale to open. Inhale to broaden out through those chest muscles. Exhale to close. Inhale to walk those fingertips toward the spine. Exhale to open. Inhale to broaden out even more through those chest muscles. Exhale to close. Again, you can continue this as long as you need to. Press the pause button on the video and keep going if you feel like you really need this today. Opening up. I'm going to do this one more time. Nice full inhale. And then bringing those arms to the hands to the mat. So walking those feet together so I can be a little more stable here. The next one, I'm going to do some light core work here, or maybe some heavy duty core work, depending on where you're at with things. I'm working on knitting those abs together. The start here is just to do a knee fold where I'm bringing a knee up toward my chest, not so high that I let that tailbone come up off of the roller or up from where it started. And inhale to the floor, exhale. I'm bringing that opposite side up. Keep reaching those blades away from the ears. You can even use those hands to help give you a little extra stability. She really likes this exercise. And one more on each side. Now, you can continue with that one, or if you want a little bit more work for those abdominals, bring both legs up to tabletop. Keep reaching those shoulder blades away from ears. We can bring one foot toward the floor, come back up to tabletop. I'm exhaling now as I lower, because that's where it tends to be most challenging to keep knitting those abdominal muscles together. Exhale, lower. Inhale to come back up to tabletop. Exhale to lower. Inhale to come back up to tabletop. I'm going to do that one more time on each side. And then one foot to the floor, keeping that belly flat as I bring that second foot to the floor. And bringing my arms into position for stick 'em up. Now, I am working to have my forearm be horizontal here. So if you find yourself in this position, you're probably trying too hard to get those elbows toward the floor. In that case, what I want you to do is actually lift your elbows a little bit away from the floor and get those wrists, not your hands, but your wrists closer to the floor. From here, reaching up overhead. There's going to be an elevation when we get way up here in that upper range. Don't hunch those shoulders, but they may slide upward a bit. And then bringing those elbows back toward the waist. Each time they come back toward the waist, you want to reset those shoulder blades down your back. And reaching and returning. Among other things, this movement is really good for stretching your pec minor muscle. That's a little different than that pec major. When we did that chest opener, that's a little bit more of a pec major opener. Okay, back down. And reaching. And play a little bit with your breathing here. For most of us, it's going to be easier to keep those upper abdominals in if we exhale as you reach. But if you're pretty good at keeping those bottom ribs in and that base of the breastbone in, you might experiment a little with inhaling to lengthen as you reach. She really likes this exercise as well. Hey, buddy. And reach and return. What I'm going to do, this is a lat stretch. Your lats are underneath your shoulder blades here. They're very large muscle group, run all along your back. I'm going to bring those pinky fingers together. And when I push toward the floor here, Chi, go up overhead. Up overhead. I'm going to push that heel of the hand toward the floor. And then I'm going to bring those elbows back toward the waist. This is another one when those arms get way up there, that those shoulder blades are going to slide up toward your ears. We don't want to hunch them, but let them do that. Keep those bottom ribs in. I have to actually pull in with those upper abdominals here as I get up overhead. And make sure you get those blades away from the ears as you bring those elbows back toward your waist. Reaching. And returning. And reaching. And returning. 2 more of those. Last one. When I come back, I'm going to bring those hands toward the hips again. Single leg circle. I'm going to float a leg up toward the ceiling. This is a classic Pilates exercise here. I'm going to do a soft point to my toes. Now, this classic Pilates exercise is much more challenging on the roller. You're welcome to climb off of the roller for a few moments here as you do this and just do it on a mat. Inhaling across, exhale out and up. The other option you have here, keep going if you're circling and you're doing well with it. Keep that pelvis quiet. The other option you have here is just to work on coming across and out to the side. Now, if you've got a hip replacement and it's an older, especially if it's an older hip replacement, you may have been told not to cross that midline, in which case you can just come right to that midline and then move out to the outside. If you're circling, make sure you get both directions here. So we'll do a few more in your second direction. Last one. So some nice, again, hip stability work here. And extending that opposite leg up toward the ceiling. And stirring that thigh bone in the hip socket. Really think about that thigh bone actually gliding in that socket as you stir here with that leg. Again, you have that option to move simply laterally across the body as well. And I'm going to reverse the direction of that circle. And then bringing that leg down. Now, with those arms, palms are up toward the ceiling here for Snow Angel. I'm going to bring those arms up and over. This is another one where when we get way up here at the top of that motion, those shoulder blades are going to slide up a little bit. Don't get tense in the neck, don't hunch the shoulders. And coming back down. You may decide to limit this motion to shoulder height and back toward the hips. Coming up. And then coming back toward the hips. Keeping that chin tucked, back of the neck long. Again, those abs strong so that we're not letting your spine move around on that roller. We're not letting your low back pop up or the base of the breastbone pop up toward the ceiling. Get long, long, long through that spine as you reach. 2 more. And the last one. Now the next one is going to involve some flexion of that spine. And there may be a whole bunch of reasons you wouldn't want to do this, not the least of which would be any neck issues, maybe with scoliosis, if you don't want to be in that flexed position or shouldn't be in that flexed position. So if that's the case, you can go back to your knee folds or your tabletop knee folds here instead, or any of your other chest opening movements. And I'm going to tuck the chin and begin to peel up off of that roller, one bone at a time, until just the tips of my shoulder blades are in that plane of the roller, working at sinking that belly and knitting together. Inhaling to come down, exhale to peel up. If you start feeling like you're pulling that head forward, that's too much. Start smaller, just go to where you can. And coming back down. Same thing with the belly. If the belly's not flattening and it's starting to pop out, that's too much as well. If you can't get that in, tone it down a little bit. Work on getting stronger at a little lower angle, and then you can start getting more aggressive with that when you get better at flattening that belly. One more time here. Now, I'm going to flow right into my set of hundreds. If you're keeping your head down, you can go into your hundreds from there. I'm pumping those arms. I'm working on keeping my torso quiet, collarbones open, shoulder blades away from ears as I pump the arms. Inhaling. And exhaling, and inhaling, and exhaling. We're going to do 5 more cycles here. So I'm feeling a lot of work in those abs. I'm also feeling a little bit of work in these muscles here along the sides of the neck. That's okay. If you're feeling strain in the back of the neck, bring the head down. One more breath cycle here. And then I'm going to come down, down, down. And those are my hundreds. Now, rolling off to the side of the roller to get ready for the next one here, where I'm going to put the roller up above the mat. I'm going to reach up overhead with this. So our neutral spine version of this exercise is going to be lifting that belly. Remember, we don't want to let that belly just fall into the floor and end up tight and short in that low back. So I'm going to lift that belly to help lengthen my low back. I'm going to lengthen my legs in one direction, and I'm going to reach the top of my head and toward the far wall here, and just really work on lengthening. And this might just be a nice, long, static, sort of isometric exercise for me. If you can do some hyperextension, what you might try instead here is putting those forearms up on top of the roller, and from there I'm going to begin to extend up and out the top of my head, drawing those shoulder blades away from my ears as I extend here. And maybe even getting just a little bit longer yet when I come back to that hover position. That's still an active position. I still have that belly button lifted into my spine. Extending up and out the top of the head. Getting a little bit longer with each repetition here. That top of my head just a little closer to that far wall. This one's feeling really good to me today, so I'm going to do this 4 more times. 3, 2, still reaching those legs toward that baseboard behind me. If your legs lift off of the floor, that's just fine. If they want to stay on the floor, that's just fine too. Don't force one or the other. coming back down, nice and long here. From there, I'm going to come up to hands and knees, where I'm going to use the roller for just a little extra instability here when I go to do my donkey kick. So I'm walking those knees closer together. I'm going to get a stopwatch here so we can get a timer on you. And we're going to do this for 1 minute on each leg. If you need to move to the mat, you may. If you're having wrist issues with the roller here, try just a fist on the mat. And I'm starting the clock. I'm lengthening that thigh as I lift the leg. I'm working at keeping that belly lifted into my spine. I'm trying to bring that foot toward my seat as I lift the leg. Great quad lengthener here, as well as a glute exercise, as well as an ab exercise. I'm working those spinal erectors up and down the spine. And I'm working those hip stabilizers as well. What I want to avoid is getting into a turnout with that leg as I lift. I'm really working on keeping that inner thigh relatively close to my midline here, and that thigh pointed straight at the floor. And we've got about 15 seconds left here. Chin is still slightly tucked. Don't let the head drop toward the floor. And we're going to go to the second side here, starting our clock. Keeping that belly lifted, lengthening that thigh. Those hamstrings get crampy here. Again, just roll onto your back. Give those hamstrings a little stretch. Get back to it when you can. Inner thigh, relatively close to that midline. Breastbone lifted away from the floor. Nice and long out the top of the head and back through your tailbone. Hips are even. Got about 20 seconds to go here. Bringing that foot toward your seat as you lift and lengthen that thigh. Should feel this in those glutes as well as those hamstrings. 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm bringing that down. I'm going to sit back here and just take a little stretch. Now, you may roll onto your back and hug your knees in. If you've got knee issues, this can be a lot of pressure on those knees. I want to throw a couple more advanced exercises as well. So if you want to opt out of those today, this is a good place to stop the video. And if you want to get a little bit more, so there's a Pilates exercise, leg pull front, where we do this from a plank position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up into my plank, and the idea is once I set my spine in place, I'm going to keep my spine right where it is. I'm going to lift a leg. I'm going to flex and point, making a little movement with my feet and ankles, moving a little bit at the shoulder joint. But I'm working on keeping my hips even, and I'm working on keeping that belly lifted, and I'm working on keeping that spine long and strong. I'm going to do that 3 more times on each side. 2 and 2, and 1 more on each side. 1 and 1. Coming down once again. I'm going to sit back, just briefly stretch my back. And probably the toughest one of all today, side plank. I'm going to just go, since this is the more advanced section, I'm going to go right for a full side plank. Although I am going to stagger my feet. So I've got my top leg back. So right now, my left side is toward the mat. And I'm going to get my right leg back. I'm going to start with 2 hands here to get into position. And I'm going to work on trying to get that to 1. Chin is tucked, back of the neck is long, and I'm just going to go for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bring that bottom leg down. And I'm going to move this to the other end of my mat so you can still see me. You're welcome to just roll over to your other side. Once again, I'm going to use both hands to get started. I'm going to put my left leg back, my right leg forward. You can bring that arm right up in the air. You can have a hand on the hip. Nice long spine. I'm going to stay here for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bring that knee down. And we will call it a day right there. Thanks very much for joining me today, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, so our next one. You may have to include your animals with whatever workout you're doing.